Welcome to Cancer and Peace Moments. I'm Sean Stewart, here with my good friend Peter Scalzo, and this week we are going to have just a 15-minute segment here that has snippets and insights from previous episodes that we think you'll find meaningful, and we hope you enjoy. But this one's a little bit different twist. It's what happens after you die is the question today. And so Peter has thoughts to kind of kick off because you wrestle with this in your own journey, and you thought it would be important enough for us to talk about it today.
I do. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I think that it's pretty much an intellectual exercise at first. I think for all of us it is. And like you said, maybe there's like 8 tenets to your worldview. What's right and wrong? Where does a human being come from? All that kind of stuff. But usually one of the components of a worldview is what happens when I die. And so, yeah, you can have all these intellectual discussions and conversations about it. But so it's kind of this question floating out there, I think. And I think for instance, when I received my cancer diagnosis, it became a little bit more front and center, but I was getting surgeries and having good results from my surgeries. You know, I'm in my 18th year of this cancer journey. And so it was more prevalent, more in front and center when that was going on. Just the whole cancer diagnosis itself connotates this pain, suffering, treatment, and then the possibility of death. But then in my cancer journey in 2015, when I had the metastatic cancer diagnosis, and you can listen to earlier podcasts to hear my story or get my book, but that's when it became front and center. It was as if something sucked it right in front of my face. And because I was in ICU, had this metastatic cancer diagnosis, and I knew from my research that I had a 5% survival chance. That's what high-grade urothelial metastatic cancer had at that time. It may have changed a little bit now because of some new treatment options. But I was still sort of consumed with my recovery, surgery, all that stuff. And then in 2017, that's when it really became paramount for me to deal with. I was forced to deal with it because in 2017, and I've talked about this before, I was in a New York hospital and my oncologist and surgeon teary-eyed came in, and my surgeon's fellow was actually crying, put their hands on me and said, "That's it, we're done." There were tumors all throughout my urinary system and in the region, one as big as a tennis ball in my neobladder, and it was okay, quit work, go on disability, and go home. And Sloan Kettering, for the second time, said, have him call hospice care, get everything in order, his affairs in order. So then it became, wow, okay, I really need to deal with this issue of what happens when I die.
This is one of the big affairs you need to get in order.
Yes.
From your viewpoint. And so,
yeah.
And we talked a bit about things that you should do with the cancer diagnosis and getting the affairs in order, but we didn't spend a lot of time on this particular item. We talked about faith journey.
Right.
I think one of the things I'm curious about as we're talking about this is I think there's probably a tendency for you and I have been involved in recovery situations. I was thinking about one we had talked about recently where someone was given false hope.
Yeah.
And so the point of this podcast today is not to give false hope. So there is something that is kind of ruminating around with me within this question is, how do you know that this, what you're getting ready to, when none of us have been on the other side.
Yes.
And so, there's a little bit of the question that probably needs to be thought about inside of here is the harder question is that you had to actually come down to what do you believe and what are you going to put your trust in? And so I do think there's something that's poignant in that we can go through our lives with a form of stated trust, but not really wrestle with this question. And now you're saying there's been a couple times in your life now, not too long past, that you've had to really wrestle with and make a determination how to trust.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to put it, how to trust. I think this is really one of the bases of why I think it's so fundamentally important to have a spiritual program in your life when you have a cancer diagnosis, because I know for me, I've had many recurrences, many times where the news was not good. And my spirituality tells me what happens when I die.
Mm-hmm.
It's in scripture. It's been shown by Jesus, and it's been displayed what happens after death. And so I, theoretically what happens, but also that's when I started in 2017. I started to really, like you made the point. It's a great point. I've never been to France yet, but I know France exists. I've seen pictures and I've met people who have been to France. And so maybe one day I'll go. But with heaven or the afterlife, it's the concept is, well, have I met people that have gone there? And what does it mean anyway that I've got a spirit and a soul that's going to leave this body? This body's just an earth suit that houses the spiritual being inside of me. That spiritual being is eternal. This body isn't. And this is such a central tenet, I believe, to my cancer journey, is this belief in the afterlife that's going to be amazing. It really is huge, because even when I'm being hospitalized, getting another recurrence, whatever, I'm always like, well, I have a great exit strategy. Yeah. I know where I'm going. And it's interesting. I've had discussions with atheists or agnostics on this topic, and I'll say to them, okay, so let's assume that my belief system is all fantasy, that what I believe is just mythology. It's not going to happen. I'm still better off than a position that says there's no such thing as an afterlife, a spiritual world. There's no such thing as God. And yet my belief, I know with a certainty of what's going to happen after I pass. And that's something that I can only say was communicated to me in the spiritual realm when I had some very difficult surgeries. And I call it a blessed assurance of something that I did receive. And so I think it just, for me personally, it gives me purpose and hope and peace as I go through this cancer journey. I don't know where I'm going to land. I mean, one of our guests said they told her she was terminal. Right. And they basically have told me that, we don't know what's going to happen if we stop giving you treatment. 7 years of immunotherapy treatment, and the other person, that I'm the longest one they've ever had on it, because they don't know what else to do, because the data shows when they stop it, the cancer comes back. So I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So having this spiritual relationship with Jesus and what he says and holding on to it is essential for me to get peace in this journey.
And this is, we've talked about this a touch. This is a gift to get to wrestle with this question. Not everybody gets to have this wrestle in a really focused way where they have to consciously really think about. And I think the reason why we're having this conversation is because you've had to do that. Because you've been given a terminal diagnosis, been told to get your affairs in order, and you recognize this is one of the things that you needed to get in order was, what do I believe? What am I going to trust in? What am I going to put my hope in? And it's not based upon no evidence or understanding. It's based upon a real relationship and experiences that you've had with God. And so your trust and belief has been built and built and grown and built. And so I think the walk away from this discussion is examine. Don't be afraid to ask this question. Dive in. Get to an understanding. And when you really experience God answering that question for you, then it gives you great peace. Mm-hmm. Peace that surpasses an understanding that you can have at this moment.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add that would be helpful for this conversation before we close out today's podcast?
No, I'm just going to make a comment that those people who had that blessed assurance of eternal life as they faced death, because I've been with them, and accepted the fact that the doctor said there's nothing more we can do. It's just passing. I've seen the peace on their face. I've seen God do an amazing work in that room, an amazing work with them. I've been with them as they've taken their last breath. And it's, it's not to be feared. It's a tremendous, I've experienced such peace in the room, such a presence.
And we're not talking about a couple of times.
No,
you've been
I've
part of
done
a
a
cancer
lot.
support group,
Yeah.
and you've watched not the entire, but you've watched maybe the entire thing turn
18
over.
years worth of partnering with people as they go through the process, and lots of hospice journeys, lots of end-of-life journeys. And
so you don't say that with just a flippant, hey, I saw a couple people and they seem to be peaceful.
No.
That this is such an important part for their journeys when you're at that last moment, that real peace and knowing that there's hope in tomorrow.
Not to be feared. And I've experienced an amazing presence in the room, an amazing peace. I mean, almost where, wow, this was a pleasure to be a part of this journey with this person.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope that you found something meaningful and insightful from what you heard today. Have a great day.